Welcome, everybody, to episode 7 of the Arch City Poker Podcast. My name is Tony. Again, welcome. Merry Christmas to everybody. It is December. It is December 9th as we're recording this. And Nick, how are you doing on these cold, wintry days?
Doing great. Excited to finally dive into some PLO after we had 6 great No Limit episodes.
Absolutely. Yep. 100%. So if you didn't catch last week's episode, we talked about 3-betting. We talked about why we 3-bet, the types of hands we 3-bet with, what we're trying to accomplish when we 3-bet. If you didn't happen to see that, go ahead and check out our YouTube channel. It's got a lot of great information for you. And if you are a first-time comer, go ahead, check out archcitypoker.com. We have tons of no limit hold'em and PLO information for you. Go ahead, sign up, become a member, join the family. And as we dive into PLO today, a lot of the people listening may not play PLO, but it is an extremely important game. And from my experience, I would say it is the second most popular game in any other card room that I play in. And usually it's low. It's usually 2-2 or 5-5. And Nick, as we talk about PLO, I would say that transitioning from No Limit Texas Hold'em to PLO sounds probably pretty complicated. And if somebody isn't well versed with having 2 additional cards or the strategy behind it, they probably don't know where to start. So if you're somebody who is maybe sick and tired of seeing all the people who dump chips at my No Limit Hold'em table and they go to PLO and I want to hop into their game, but I don't want to be a bad player, what can I do to start that PLO journey, to start kind of learning and setting the correct foundation for myself?
I would definitely suggest coming over to archcitypoker.com. First of all, we have plenty of content that I essentially custom made myself that is tailor made for the live low to mid stakes PLO games that you'll find around the country. And as far as tonight, just in this podcast episode, I think that to clear up some misconceptions about PLO that I think a lot of players have that are strictly no limit players. They think that it's just a gambler's game. They think players are there just putting chips in the middle and just kind of praying or hoping, or there's always the joke that you just say pot and hope. There are a lot of players that do that. That's not the correct way how to play. We will teach you how to play correctly pre-flop. And, a lot of players that go from no limit to PLO, I see a lot of players that, Tony, they play, honestly, maybe pretty reasonably well pre-flop and no limit. They might play, let's just say ballpark 20% of hands pre-flop, maybe a little bit more if they limp some. But then they go to PLO and they think just because they get the 2 extra cards that they're supposed to play like 60% of hands, 80% of hands. And, even though PLO is a post-flop game, a drawing game more so compared to its counterpart, I would say no limit, if you have a sound pre-flop game in PLO, if you make decisions that put yourself in a position to succeed post-flop in PLO, and I'm not saying that we don't do that in no limit, but in PLO, I think it's even more exaggerated. I think that, essentially we are playing 4 stacks a lot more often in PLO. Players that you guys will play against, they will be punting a lot more often. They will be drawing to the second nuts way too often, multi-way. They will be committing with the second nuts or third nuts when stacks are starting to be threatened. So, I think going over to archcitypoker.com is a good start. I think listening through this entire podcast episode will give you guys, honestly, a really good starting point into, like I said, what's true and what's not, the misconceptions of PLO, what your general thoughts need to be when you consider transitioning over to that game, so that you do have, as Tony kind of alluded to, that flexibility. Like if you walk into a room, the most popular games are going to be no limit and PLO. And you don't want to be handcuffed to essentially just no limit. If you walk into a room and you think that the most profitability is going to be at the PLO table, where the guys might be punting the most, they might be gambling the most, then you want to be confident and competent in multiple variants, or as many variants as you can as possible. But here at archcitypoker.com, we specifically are going to focus on No Limit Hold'em and PLO because those are the two games right now that are obviously the most popular in almost every live room in the country. And I think those will remain the most popular moving forward.
Yeah, I would agree. I know, and I said it earlier in the channel, but there's nothing more, and I don't know if anybody listening has ever experienced this, but there's nothing more frustrating than having somebody sit down that you know dumps chips or is not good or they're very action oriented, and a PLO table opens up and a couple people, maybe one or two that you need at your game to make your game a good game, end up leaving. And you're not sure if you want to sit in that PLO game, even though you feel like it might be a profitable experience if I do so. But I know for myself, I oftentimes would get frustrated because I'm like, dang, man, if I could just like kind of follow where the money goes, if I'm spending all this time in card rooms and card clubs, I want my time to be as effective as possible. And sometimes that needs to change tables. So Nick, when we talk about the landscape of PLO, one thing that you've always mentioned to me, and I couldn't agree more, but and I'm gonna butcher kind of how you say it, but it's like before the poker Black Friday when everybody's playing full tilt poker and Poker Stars is all the rage and moneymakers winning the World Series and everybody's just not good at Texas Hold'em. And that's kind of the landscape of PLO. So it's like taking that universe back years ago, 15, 20 years ago, and applying it today. And would you say that that's kind of accurate, or what would you say the landscape skill wise kind of looks like? And is there like an incentive for somebody to transition from maybe Hold'em to PLO if they haven't already done so?
Absolutely. I think that I would say current day, we're recording this in December of 2025, that the generally speaking, the PLO low to mid stakes games, the general skill level is the equivalent to that of kind of what you alluded to, Tony. I would say the no limit cash games that started to really pop up around when Moneymaker made his run, because obviously limit hold'em cash games were like really the only thing that ran for no limit. I mean, no limit cash, or I'm sorry, for hold'ems, so to speak. No limit was just a tournament variant, essentially speaking. So I think that whenever I play now, whenever I have analyzed hands or footage for students that I've worked with, I think that the games are incredibly soft, and the incentive is through the roof. Like the variance definitely will be higher, guys. Like we're not gonna sugarcoat anything at archcitypoker.com. Like I'm not gonna tell you guys that you're not gonna possibly go through some pretty nasty swings in this game, but the more often that you play, the more essentially kind of numb you become to it. The better that you are. And I would say if you guys really commit to your subscription at Arch City Poker, you really watch all the content, take in everything that we're saying as far as PLO goes, you're going to be so far ahead of the average player compared to what you could be in No Limit. And we'll make you guys great No Limit players. I promise you that. But the average No Limit player has had over 20 years of time to improve. And rooms are generally just going to improve by just playing No Limit every day. And there's so much No Limit literature that's out there, No Limit videos, content, etc. PLO, there's definitely a lot more now than there ever was, even especially like 10 years ago. There was almost none when I started first making PLO content. Within the last 5 years, it's definitely grown, and you can see the other training sites, they have PLO content. I mean, I worked when I was making videos for Run It Once, that's exclusively the kind of content that I made, but it's not really tailored to live low stakes games. I think that you guys are making a massive mistake if you are not starting your PLO journey now, because there is so much more to be made in those games, even with the variants. Even if you think it's going to take you a while, which it probably will take a little bit to become a great PLO player, you just have to be honestly just an average PLO player. Maybe even, I'm being completely candid with you guys, like if you're even just slightly below average, you're going to be incredibly better, uh, superior compared to the fields that you guys are going to be playing against. So it's really about just kind of nailing the pre-flop fundamentals, uh, understanding the basics post-flop, having to do with stack sizes and whether you're going to, hopefully not overcommit with a hand, but kind of take advantage of when your opponents overcommit with certain types of hands. High SPR compared to low SPR, it's similar to no limit. But yeah, the landscape is incredibly soft, profitable. This is the time to definitely jump in if you guys already haven't, because if you wait too long, then right now compared to no limit when Moneymaker was a thing, it's going to happen a lot faster because you've got the solvers now, you've got it's just easier to make content. So I think the average PLO player, it's not going to take as long to become pretty good compared to what it took with no limit. So I really highly recommend that you guys jump in now. And that's why we're here doing this podcast. That's why we're doing what we're doing at archcitypoker.com, because I think that we have some great strategies in place to make you guys really solid PLO players.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, speaking of hopping into a game, one thing that I noticed is if I see like a 2-2 PLO game, there's usually not too many in the rooms that I play in, but maybe there's like one or two. Stack sizes can get pretty big. And one thing that maybe took some time to get used to or think about that maybe somebody hasn't thought about, but do I need to adjust my bankroll, the amount of money that I bring to a casino, what my threshold is for losing? If I'm hopping into a game, how much should I expect to be bringing? And if there's an increased level of variance, how do I know if I'm like ready to hop into a game from a financial aspect?
Yep, as I alluded to, there's definitely going to be more variance. If you, first of all, if you need a bankroll to begin with, then you definitely need more than what you would need for kind of like the equivalent no limit stakes, if you will. So like if you guys are playing 1-3 or 2-5, no limit, I would say a 1-2 with a $5 bring in, or a 2-2 PLO, depending on, what room you're playing in. They're similar structures, but yeah, those games, the PLO games will play, I would say slightly larger, to quite a bit larger than the equivalent 2-5 if you were 1-3. Just because everybody though is possibly sitting with more, like if they're allowed to buy in deeper, if you're allowed to buy in for 75% of stacks or match stacks. Maybe there's uncapped games that you guys are playing in if they're in a club, or if they're private games or home games, whatever the case may be. I even for like no limit guys, like this is one of the big misconceptions that I notice with a lot of players in the live low stakes populations, whether it's no limit or PLO, is that, oh, everybody's got 2,000, so I don't have enough to play in this game. And it's like, no, you do. Like if it's a 1-3 and it's no limit, $300 is 100 bigs. That's a standard buy-in for a poker game. Like you don't have to buy in for more than that. And our strategies are made and tailored for you guys to do very well with 100 bigs, whether it's no limit or PLO, or a lot of the strategies we have are tailored for you guys to play deeper because you want to play as deep as possible with opponents that you think are worse than you. So, talking specifically about a PLO game, if it's a 1-2 with a $5 bring in, you can treat that essentially as the equivalent of like a 2-5 no limit game. And if you sit with 500 and that's 100 bigs at 2-5, you can do the same thing at PLO. It doesn't matter if the guy next to you has 100K. Yeah, he might be the big stack at the table, but that doesn't mean anything. Like effective stacks are what matter in these games. So if you have a $500 stack, that's all that matters. Like for you, every hand that you're in, even if everybody has more than you, every hand that you're in, essentially everybody has a $500 stack. That's the most important thing to keep in mind. And then obviously as your stack hopefully increases, then the effective stack size will rise unless somebody is shallower. So yeah, Tony, I mean, there's going to be more variance. If you need, like I said, if you need a bankroll, now if you guys have income, and again, this isn't financial advice from Tony or I, but if you have a career, if you have a job, if you have other streams of revenue, income, if you will, do you need a bankroll per se? Maybe not so much, but if you have separate funds set aside for poker, or if you are playing semi-professionally, or if you have ambition to play professionally one day, or if you are a pro and you're watching this, you definitely need more for PLO than you'll need for No Limit. What's the exact number? I think it's pretty subjective. I mean, I don't want to get into specific numbers for Bankroll tonight. I have content all over this platform that covers that. But yeah, in general, you do need a little more for PLO because the swings are going to be much more frequent. But like I said, guys, if you really listen to what we're telling you, if you take our suggestions and you apply them in a practical manner in these games that you're playing in, the downswings and the swings in general aren't going to be as prevalent as they would be if everybody was playing the game properly or well, because you're going to be so much better than your opponents that the swings won't be quite as severe, if you will. Like you'll have your downswing, but you'll mostly be moving up the graph, so to speak. So you need a little more. The swings are going to be there compared to No Limit. But in general, the biggest thing, again, guys, is you don't need to worry about sitting with as much as your opponents if you are just getting your feet wet in this game. Like, I would sit with 100 bigs and take it from there. And if the more comfortable that you get, if you can buy in for more, or as you start to build your stack, then yeah, obviously, like I said, we have content that will prepare you guys for those deep stack situations.
Yep, absolutely. I can't agree with you more. I know for like No Limit Texas Hold'em, when I'm thinking about the amount of money that I need to bring to the casino to play, or do I need to have a stop loss? I think those are super important as you're kind of gearing, because it's going to set, and we had a podcast about this a couple weeks ago, about the mental game of poker. And if you only have $1,000 to your name and you want to take a shot at PLO because you heard that it's easy money, but every dollar that you put in the pot is just stressful to you. Like, Christmas is coming up. Do I want to be playing in a game that's quite volatile?
Yeah.
All those things are going to influence the way that you play. And if that's kind of the spot that you're in, I would focus on understanding the game and the fundamentals and just spend more time grinding on the website looking at modules before I'd probably step into play. But as we've kind of talked about, like, whatever money you bring, just be prepared. And this is the same thing for Hold'em. Not that you're going to lose it, but if that money vanished, you need to be okay. So
Yeah, and one more thing I'll add, and like I said, we are going to be, you guys that have been subscribers to this channel have known this for years, that I'm going to be as candid as I can with you about what to expect when you jump into any kind of game or anything that we've talked about, really. But I want to make it incredibly clear that if you guys have not really played a whole lot of PLO, if any, before, it's going to seem like, how do I put it? There is a lot more BS that happens compared to No Limit. Like, you guys that, a lot of you I notice get really emotional. We talked about a lot of this. Tony mentioned it in like the mental game episode of this podcast, that, you know, like, I got sucked out on the river again, or, you know, I feel entitled to win this pot against this inferior player. Those things are all going to be 10x in PLO, guys. I'm not trying to scare you. I'm just giving you the truth that it's going to take a minute for you to adjust and understand that at the end of the day, No Limit is an 80-20 game, meaning that when you dominate your opponent in No Limit, you're usually like a 4-1 fave. You're usually 80% fave. In PLO, if you get it in really good, you're typically around like a 60% fave, maybe a little bit more than that sometimes. I'm not saying there are going to be times where you're more, but generally speaking, it is a 60-40 game. And so it's going to feel very flippy, very coin flippy, if you will. And you might ask, well, Nick, how is this profitable if I'm flipping coins all the time? Well, yeah, guys, you need to play enough hands to realize your edge, to realize your equity, if you will. And that the way that you make up for it, like how essentially it's as good, if not better, than the 80-20 that you'll run into with No Limit, is that you guys are going to be playing for stacks far more often than your No Limit. No Limit players, and Tony and I's opinions for sure, I know he'll echo this, that they are not playing for stacks even close to as often as they should be. You guys in general are not playing aggressive enough. You're not playing for stacks even close to as often as you should be in No Limit. So in PLO, though, I think that it's just naturally easier to have hands post flop that you feel like you need to commit with. A lot of players feel that pot is the only size they can use. So I think pots kind of artificially bloat pretty early post flop. And so, yeah, um, there are going to be swings with that. But if you guys are playing the way that we suggest and you're getting your money in good, or it's either essentially like you're getting it in ahead or flipping it worse, then in the long run, the 60-40 is still going to work out better for you than the 80-20 no limit, just because there's more money to be made at that. So yes, swings are going to be there a little more than no limit, as I've alluded to many times, but the win rate, the ceiling is going to be far higher. So again, like, I'm not trying to scare you guys off. It's just the harsh reality that PLO is, you are going to have moments where you feel like, yeah, I just can't win because, like, they got there in the turn again, or they got there in the river again, or they have top set versus your middle set. But these guys are going to play, can't stress this enough, so incredibly poorly pre and post flop that the way we have you guys playing, and you'll see this over at archshittypoker.com, you're going to put yourself in a position where your decisions and your decision-making tree that you'll have, like, it's going to be far easier, believe it or not, than it will be for no limit, I think, guys. Like, when I play live low-stakes PLO games compared to no limit, it's not just because of my superior skill edge, but just that the spots are just so much easier because you're in these multi-way spots where things are a little more straightforward, and you're essentially either getting it in really good or you're flipping at worse in spots. And you'll see more what I mean by that when you guys come over to archshittypoker.com. We've got live stream hand analysis that I review from places like The Lodge, other streams as well, but other hands that I've played personally myself. But you guys, it's it'll take you a minute to get used to it. You just want to get the reps in, get used to the game, and it's not as daunting or gambly as you guys might think it is, or players tell you that it is. Candidly, anybody that tells you it's just a circus game or it's just for gamblers, they don't know what the hell they're talking about. Like, they're not qualified to tell you guys that. There's only a handful of qualified PLO players or instructors that play in the United States. So I think you guys just need to get in there, just get used to it. And once you get used to the swings and how the pots are just bigger on average more often, it's really not that big of a deal.
Yeah. I mean, playing with the idea that you're going to be flipping is probably pretty intimidating. But when we think about what types of hands our opponents are deciding to go with, the types of hands that we're deciding to go with, there's going to be a pretty big discrepancy over the quality of the hands, and there's a lot of factors that come into that. And Nick, when you see people playing PLO in your room, in the common games that you're in, what are some of, like, the biggest leaks or some of the biggest glaring issues that you see at the tables that could be easily rectified, or maybe concepts that players just don't understand, or they're playing, they still think queens preflop is like a really nutty hand when it's not quite so nutty in PLO. But what are some of the biggest differences, or maybe some of the biggest leaks that you see?
Yeah, we can start right there. Preflop, an incredible amount of leaks. Players coming for no limit that overvalue the big pair hands, so much so that they just don't even care what the other two cards are. And, Tony and I have talked about this a lot when I've worked with him on his PLO game, that you generally want all four cards to kind of be working together in some fashion. Is that always going to be the case? Not always. And as you move into position, it doesn't have to always quite be the case. But for example, like, if you are a lot of no limit players coming to PLO, they get married to aces, and aces are still very good in PLO, but it's if you just have aces post flop and nothing else going for them on the flip, for example, then a lot of players get married to that in these medium to high SBR spots. But I would say, just speaking in generalities tonight, Tony, pre-flop, way too many hands being played voluntarily. So, like, players playing, like I said, going from 20% of hands to 20 to 30% of hands played in a ring no limit game to all of a sudden playing 60 to 80% of hands in PLO just because they have the 2 extra cards and they think to themselves, well, I can flop the flush draw with this like decent pocket pair that I have now. And that's, that's one of the big ones. Like I see a lot of no limit players, they will get a hand like Jack 10 4-4 with like a Jack high suit, like a single suit hand. And they'll think, well, I've got this Broadway suit with the Jack 10, and then I have pocket fours. That's like too good to like, okay, no limit hands, like good hands to speculate with in a live low stakes game. When in fact, that's pretty terrible because a lot of times what you end up doing is you end up flopping a non-nut flush draw with the Jack 10, or you flop bottom set with your fours 4 ways post flop. And then players will, moving to post flop, overvalue hands like bottom set with no redraw in these medium to high SPR spots. Drawing to non-nutty hands is a big one as well. When in doubt, you want to be drawing to the nuts. You want to be committing with nutty hands or hands that are very good with redraws. These are things that we should definitely keep in mind when transitioning from no limit to PLO. But I think the big one is definitely playing way too many hands pre-flop, overvaluing the big pairs that aren't double suited and or connected enough, overvaluing lighter ranking, like middling to lighter ranking cards. The hands like the 8-7-6-5 single suit rundown. It's all right, like in a 6-handed game, especially if you're maybe in position or if you're heads up. But the way that these live low stakes games play, guys, is that you're going to play probably deeper, and over 90% of the time, maybe over 95% of the time, you're going to be multi-way. That's the biggest thing that you guys are going to run into transitioning from no limit to PLO, is that no limit, you run into way more heads up spots. But PLO, it's going to be specifically these games that we're talking about and the games that we are teaching you guys how to play, and they're going to be multi-way. Like, you might as well think to yourself 100% of the time. So yes, there will be spots to bluff, but really we're setting you up with hands to play pre-flop that help you flop nutty types of hands that are easy to go with, that give you easy decision making post flop, or nutty draws that you also can get aggressive with, or you can essentially make easy decisions with. So yeah, I'd again, cleaning up your pre-flop game. You're gonna seem like you're much tighter than your opponents, but you're gonna be much more aggressive. And then post flop, it's a little too much to get into and for one podcast episode, but I promise you guys, if you come to archcitypoker.com, everything is going to be explained. And I've used this analogy before, almost in like a paint by numbers manner. Like, it's going to be incredibly easy to understand. I help set you up with really easy decision making, or a really easy decision making process post flop. And it's a strategy and process that I kind of came up with myself. I haven't seen anything like it on other sites, anything that's free out there on the internet or on YouTube here. It's a really easy to follow strategy that you basically do one thing in higher SPR spots, and then you kind of reverse the strategy when it becomes a lower SPR. So it is actually, I would say, honestly, as easy as I think our no limit strategies are to follow, guys. I think our PLO is actually easier, and that should give you guys a little peace of mind if you are a little fearful of jumping into this great game.
Yeah. And we have the PLO Bible. We have the No Limit Texas Hold'em Bible that are modules that are a module is essentially a group of videos that maybe one video would have been too lengthy. So we divided up a really important topic into several separate videos that have an opportunity to breathe. Maybe they don't require you to sit down for 45 minutes over the same topic, because it's tough to to focus that hard for that long on that many videos. So we have these strategies in place, and when you talk about all these pots going multi-way, the first thing that I think of is position. And in Hold'em, at least for me, if there's anybody who's to my right and they're an aggressive player, I traditionally can try to make their life pretty difficult with 3-betting, with squeezing, with check raising, just putting them in some really uncomfortable spots out of position. In PLO, that is even more important. And Nick, when we think about position in PLO, and if you're a newer player and we want to emphasize the idea of let's get some exercise in from playing hands in position, why is that?
Simply put, the nuts are always changing in PLO compared to no limit. Even if you start out on the flop with like a static texture, um, any kind of cards that come turn and river, and I'm not like, if it's the most static board ever, like, yes, guys, I understand some turns and rivers probably don't really change the nuts all that often, but in PLO, whatever the possible current nuts are on every street, it's always going to be relevant, especially with as multi-way or as often as we are multi-way in these live low stakes games. So dynamic runouts, nut changing runouts, which I said, guys, it's going to be much more prevalent in PLO than no limit. It's always going to favor the player in position. So if you're ever in doubt with your pre-flop raise first in ranges and you're in earlier position, if you think it's close, until you guys get really comfortable and you really know what you're supposed to be playing, I would just dump those hands. I think in PLO pre-flop compared to no limit, like Tony and I will suggest to you guys over on the train site and even here that obviously playing a little bit tighter out of position is probably the right thing to do as your baseline. But we've, especially myself, I've told you guys before, once you get really skilled in no limit, if the table is really weak, you really can open it up and do a lot of things with your game pre-flop. But it's still mostly in position. And PLO, even where I feel like I can't even quantify it, guys, but let's say I thought my skill edge is 25 times that it is in no limit. I still keep things pretty incredibly, I don't know if rigid's the right word, but I would say pretty snug, especially out of position, because no matter how bad I think my opponents are in PLO, if they have position on me, it's just so incredibly difficult to deal with that, especially when you're multi-way. So again, yeah, due to the nuts always being relevant on every street, no matter what type of flop it is, for the most part, position is going to matter so much so, guys. So I would, yeah, definitely emphasize trying to play the majority of your hands in position. You'll notice how much of a problem you are for your opponents, because again, going back to like your opponents playing maybe 80% of hands in PLO, like they see King 9 3 3 double suit, and that's like, oh yeah, I can flop two different types of flushes, or I can flop a set with the threes, make straights or good two pairs or whatever with the King 9 3 3, and they limp in from early position, and now all of a sudden they're out of position to maybe 3 or 4 players. And they're putting themselves in really marginal situations post flop, which is the number one thing we need to avoid in PLO. I can't tell you guys how important it is to be in position and to keep your pre-flop ranges pretty snug and essentially just like close to what we suggest over at archcitypoker.com.
Yeah, I know position is where I spend most of my time. Whether you're a skilled PLO player or skilled no limit Texas Hold'em player, most of your aggression should be coming from in position. The level of difficulty and the lack of information you get from being out of position, I mean, think of it as just profitable playing. We're trying to make profitable decisions on every street. And we're not being, I mean, we can still make profitable decisions, but it is harder to make those decisions because you're making them with less information when you're out of position. So for those who are maybe seeing strong hands and they're just wanting to get involved, PLO is a multi-way game. Very rarely will I see hands go heads up unless there's maybe a 3-bet pre-flop, which you're probably not going to actually see a whole lot because everybody's going to be limping and cold calling in pre. So the flops go 3, 4, 5 ways. And if we're not in position, it's just going to make our lives so much more difficult to actually get to where we need to be as far as our relative hand strength goes, to make profitable calling decisions when there's players left act behind us. Things just get complicated. And the same principles apply to Hold'em, but they're just magnified for PLO. When we talk about hands and people having King 9 3 3 double suited, thinking that it's a strong hand, we're going to have them step away from those types of hands, and we're going to try to have them do more nutted combinations and better rundowns. And when we say then, Nick, what types of hands are we suggesting that players, generally speaking, we don't need a hand history or a pre-flop
Yeah.
range tree, but just generally, like, what are we trying to accomplish with our pre-flop hands?
Yeah, that's a great question. And, maybe something we could have started the podcast with, but I think it's better now than never. So, I think you guys might have an idea, though, given what we've already talked about. But really, it's about, again, putting yourself in a position to, for lack of a better term, be on top of your opponent post flop. So, whether you are flopping a better made hand or a better draw, how do we do that? Well, we do that by playing higher ranking cards, by playing hands that are double suited, and by playing hands that are connected. The more of those components or qualities that you have, the better your hand. So obviously, Ace Ace Jack 10 double suit is a phenomenal starting PLO hand. It's not that something similar like 7-7 5-4 double suit isn't a good hand, but it's not a hand that's going to put you in a position to probably dominate in these types of games because you're not heads up as often. If you flop a set of sevens, it's hardly ever top set, so that's not great. If you flop any kind of flush draw, whether it's the 7 high or the 5 high multi-way, that's not going to be great. So yeah, in general, Tony, we just need to, whenever we're in doubt, we need to think to ourselves like, do we have higher ranking cards? Are we double suited? Are we connected? And if the more of those that we can add together, the better off we are going to be.
Absolutely. And Nick, when you're talking about rundowns, you mentioned that hands like 8765 probably feel pretty strong, even though they're double suited. What are some of the hands that you see players very commonly getting involved with that, if we had to guess, the larger player population also thinks that they're decent hands to get involved with that maybe are contrary to what is true?
Yeah. Great follow up to essentially the last question and answer. So, again, I would say the pocket pairs, especially the bigger ones that are not like the absolute premiums, but like, for example, your Queens, Jacks, and Tens. So you're pretty like in no limit. Queens, Jacks, and Tens are obviously premium Broadway pairs, but in PLO, guys, especially with how these games play, if you're not starting off with a double suited combo, it better be incredibly connected. And I'm talking like Queen, Queen, 10-9 single suit. A lot of you guys will look at a hand like Queen, Queen, let's say 7-6 single suit. And you're like, well, I've got the queens, I've got the 7-6 that kind of covers the other end of the board a little bit, and I've got the one suit. Guys, if you're, and this is way different than no limit, like if you're able to limp behind on the button with it, or if you guys are really deep and there's a really straightforward player and you can call him on the button with that type of hand, that's okay. There are spots where you can speculate a little bit and maybe even a little bit more in PLO than no limit, but you got to be really careful about overvaluing a lot of these types of hands. So really just, again, if we want to just speak in generalities, single suited combos that are not incredibly connected or high card ranking, going back to those kind of three qualities that we talked about. Again, double suitedness, connectedness, high ranking cards. But if you guys are playing a lot of like, I'll see a lot of, let's say like King Jack 10-8 single suit. You might say, well, why would Nick suggest playing King Jack 10-9 single suit as opposed to King Jack 10-8? It's literally the same hand. It's not, guys. The 9 is connected to the king, giving yourself a rundown. It gives you way more straight completing possibilities. The King Jack 10-8 with that gap between that 8 and the 8 not being connected to the king, it significantly weakens your hand. And when you only have a single suit and it's not a nut suit, where multi-way, if you flop a flush draw, you're going to have what we refer to as no visibility. In PLO, I use this term a lot. I've used it a lot on this platform. I use it in almost probably all the videos that I make for the website. How visible is your draw? How visible is the hand that you're likely to make when you enter the pot pre-flop and you put money in? Like, what kind of hand are you going to make post-flop, and how visible is it? So if I play, let's say, an 8-6-5-3 single suit or even double suit, and it's kind of like a loosely connected hand, it's not that rundown that Tony alluded to, but yeah, 8-6-5-3, we can make like some trips, two pairs. There's some straights that can be made with that hand, but how visible is it? If you flop anything with that hand, are you ever truly flopping a hand that dominates your opponent when they flop something as well? Because if I have 8-6-5-3 double and Tony's got 9-8-7-6 double, if we flop anything, he's very likely on top of me to where if we play a bigger pot, I'm probably either getting free rolled or I'm just crushed. So again, avoid single suited combos, especially the lighter ranking ones. So like I think ones that are very overvalued are gonna be the single suited rundowns, like the 7-6-5-4 single. Now, if you have the double suit, is it really that much better? I think it's a better hand. There's a time and place for it. It's a good possible 3-bet candidate. It's a good hand, maybe play in position. But you just got to be careful when you get these flops where you might not be as visible. So, yeah, guys, avoid the disconnected kind of single suited bigger pairs. Like now, if you get your aces, those are all playable from probably anywhere. But if we take away one of those qualities again, if we take away a suit, so we're not even double suited, we're not even single suited. Let's say we're rainbow now. Like that hand in these types of games, guys, you're kind of playing it just for your aces. Like you're almost just set minding like you would in No Limit. So keep that in mind. I know there's a lot more that we could go into with this. It would take way more than just like a 45 to 60-minute podcast episode, but always refer back to if your double suited is huge, high ranking double suits. If you're single suited, guys, you need to most likely have at least a nut suit. If not, some kind of other nutty component in your hand, like a really big pair like kings or aces. So again, high ranking cards, double suitedness, connectedness when in doubt.
Absolutely. And I can't stress enough how important that is because you're going to be playing multi-way. And we've beat this drum a million times, but it's the same thing when you're playing Hold'em, which is if you're going to be playing multi-way, your hand generally needs to play better multi-way and it needs to be more nutted. Because if the nuts are changing every single time and we don't have the nut suit, what are you supposed to do when the flush completing turn comes in, the straight completing turn comes in, and you maybe have that, but in a middling size of it? How are you supposed to navigate profitably, right? So those are some of the things that we would want to iron into your game as to how you can navigate multi-way pots effectively. And if you play PLO and maybe you don't play Hold'em because 2 cards is boring, well, a lot of the skills that you obtain from PLO are going to translate fantastically to No Limit Texas Hold'em. You're going to have such an in-depth hand analysis kind of skill that you're going to understand board textures, positioning, nutted combos, ranges so much more effectively because there's so many more considerations that you have to be making in any given hand. And when you're playing with 3, 4, 5 people every single hand, your brain is going a million miles a minute trying to think of all these different possibilities. How do I get value here? When is it good to check? How do I bet? And with Hold'em, it's a little more mundane where the board textures are pretty slow. You might go 3, 2, 3, 4 ways every once in a while. Maybe some tables it is a little more common, but with less cards, there's less options. So your mind isn't racing so dramatically and it's a little bit easier to compartmentalize and kind of stay in your bubble a little bit. Well, but with PLO, your mind has to be vigilant and it has to be extremely considerate of what other people think and how they play and how they view their hand strength. Do people just want to see flops? Do they come there not to fold? You know, a lot of these tropes that we say is pretty common in most PLO and Texas Hold'em games. So, Nick, I think we've covered a lot of the episode 7 PLO podcast here. And of course, as everybody listening knows, there's a million different topics that we could have covered in addition to all of this. And if you like what you hear and you want an additional topic regarding PLO, you want to go over pre-flop ranges, you want to go over pre-betting pre-flop, you want to go over post-flop play, turns, rivers, how to be like a little more deceptive with your hands if you want hand history analysis from live streams like The Lodge or from our hands personally, go ahead and make a comment in Discord, make a comment on the YouTube video that you're watching, like the video, let us know what you think and what type of content you want to see. And Nick, before we start trailing off here, do you have any final thoughts?
I think we covered it pretty well. I will leave you guys with this, that in No Limit Hold'em, we teach you guys how to plan out the hand from pre-flop to the possible end, which would be the river. I will say this, that you probably can be a pretty good No Limit player by playing one street at a time. We don't suggest that. We always suggest kind of thinking about what general turns and rivers could come that could change things in the hand. But in PLO, and I mentioned this before, guys, where the nuts are always relevant on every street, no matter if it really is a static or dynamic texture, especially, of course, in the dynamic textures. But in PLO, guys, you need to always think about what kind of hand you're going to have by the time you get to the river in general. And I know that sounds, for a lot of you, maybe overly complicated. It's truly not. I'll teach you guys how to do that and what to look for, and kind of think in terms of buckets and generalities, as opposed to like every single specific type of turn or river or run out, if you will. But you need to be very conscious about what your hand will look like on rivers as opposed to what it looks like currently on the flop. That is vital. And again, come over to archcitypoker.com and I'll show you guys how to do that.
Excellent. Good points, Nick. For everybody listening, we'll see you in episode 8 the following week. And again, head on over to archcitypoker.com, check out our YouTube, our X, our Discord. And for everybody who's having a cold winter, we want to say happy holidays and happy new year. And we'll see everybody next time. Thanks again, and come on back to archcitypoker.com.